Hi, Barely Sapient here. Today I'm going to take a look at Zorin OS. More specifically, its core option for download and for usage. They have core, education, and pro. Pro you have to pay for. I'm also going to take a look at their version 18 beta, which probably isn't a good idea to install and try to use as a daily driver. But I'm going to take a look anyway, because why not? I was feeling particularly optimistic, so I took a look at Zorin OS 18 beta first. Things looked particularly promising because after installing Steam, Heroic Games Launcher, and Proton Plus, and then rebooting the system, it booted up and only used 1.6 gigabytes of system memory on a system with 32 gigs of RAM, so that was a good sign to start off with. Things seemed so promising as games in Steam largely worked. Oh, and Zorin OS 18 beta comes with Brave browser as a default instead of Firefox like most distros that I've used. And it's got a promising package manager. It's easy enough to find Steam and install. Seemed like this would be a straightforward gaming experience, even though it was a beta, but I was wrong. Now, Zorin OS is based on Debian and Ubuntu, just like Linux Mint. It does have a pro option, so there's a paid version available, and that's kind of unusual for desktop versions of Linux. Most of the time they don't do that. For their normal desktop distributions, they have three of them. They have the Pro version, they have the Core version, and the Education version. Now, the Core and Education version just swap Zorin Connect, which connects your phone to your computer, and educational apps and games. The Pro version comes out with some extra software, and the biggest thing it looks like, you get support service. Normally that's just not available for a desktop operating system. If it's a Linux distro, you just download it off the internet and you are your own support. Now there's definitely companies that sell laptops and desktops with Linux on it, and they'll offer support, but that's a whole different ballgame. You can find the 18 beta at the Zorin blog site, and this is where they compare it to Windows and Linux Mint, and they kind of hinted at might come out here with Windows 10 reaching its end of support on the 14th of October, which, well, that's 2 weeks from now. It's the first today when I was recording. I don't think it's going to be ready at that point. Personally. They also tout about integration with OneDrive and Windows apps like that, and Microsoft Office 365 through through its web-based alternatives and stuff like that. They're real big on making it a lot like Windows. Zorin OS always has been that way. So it's more like that than other distros. But this is a gaming channel. OneDrive and Office 365 aren't really the focus. So let's see how Zorin OS 18 beta works for gaming. To be fair, in their blog here about Zorin OS beta, or version 18 beta that is, they don't talk about gaming at all. So it might be that they don't really care as much about gaming. Although the Zorin blog does bring up a point. Windows 10 is reaching the end of life on its support on the 14th of October 2025. Well, unless you're in the EU, they get an extra year. Or you do some hoops and pretty much give away all your privacy. Or you give them money. Or you could switch to Windows 11, but a lot of people don't want to do that. So they do have a point. Switching to a distribution of Linux is another option. So I tested Zorin OS on my AMD system with a Ryzen 1600 AF, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and an NVIDIA Quadro M4000. When you use the USB stick and you boot from it, make sure you pick the try or install Zorin OS on modern NVIDIA drivers if you have an NVIDIA card that's at least a GTX 900 series or newer. Otherwise, it'll install really crappy open source NVIDIA drivers that just don't really work well for gaming. Like many distros of Linux, when you use the USB stick to create a bootable media, it'll boot you into a live environment. This is where you can kind of test out the operating system to see what it's going to look like and act like before installing it if you want. Installing the operating system itself is fairly straightforward. You get the usual options for language and keyboard. Now with Zorin OS, you do want to make sure the third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and additional media formats is checked. Otherwise, certain things could be broken without them. Like other distros, you have the options to erase the entire disk and install Zorin OS or something else. I am going to choose something else because I'm installing it on a system with another operating system. When you choose something else, it'll bring you to a menu that'll show you the different devices that you can install the OS to. Make sure you pick the right one. If you pick the wrong one, you're going to end up erasing another operating system or data that you already have on your system. Just bear that in mind. Once you've selected your device and made the partitions that you wanted to, just hit install now and the installation process will take care of itself after that. On your very first boot, after you install the operating system, you will have a welcome screen and the option to start a tour. I'll show you just a few things about the operating system itself. You can choose to close it or use it. Unlike Bazite or other gaming distros, Zorin OS does not come with Steam installed. Now that's not to say you can't game on Zorin OS. You certainly can. It's just that you're going to have to either install it using a package manager or a software manager like this, or use the command line. And there's certainly an option in the package manager to install Steam in Zorin OS. And interestingly, the default is FlatHub in the Zorin OS 18 beta. That's unusual. I like to go with the APT package. It just tends to work better. I've read and heard of horror stories of Flatpak Steam OS not working properly. So I went ahead and did that, and the process was easy enough. Installing Heroic Games Launcher is just as easy. Just go to the software manager and search for Heroic, and you can install the Flatpak version. I think that's the only version available ever. And hit install, and that will take care of that for you. Same stuff as just about any other Linux distro I've ever encountered. In this beta, Rise of the Tomb Raider, the benchmark, the in-game benchmark anyway, actually seemed to work fine. And at 1080p high, the score even seemed reasonable for a Linux distro. And this is using the Linux port, by the way. Skyrim Special Edition in Steam also worked fine. Seeing no issues here at all in this beta version of Zorin OS. Total War Warhammer worked fine, although slightly low performance compared to some other distros, but I didn't see any alarming issues. And in Heroic Games Launcher, Doom plus Doom 2 seem to work fine as well. So so far I've tested 3 games in Steam and 1 in Hero Games Launcher, and things seem to work at this point. So after saying that 3 games in Steam worked fairly well, and the 1 game in Hero Games Launcher worked well, I decided to, let's see how Art of Rally works. Let's just see if everything's working, right? And what had happened is, well, it took forever to load. One of the first screens that comes up when you first play the game is it'll show you something to set the graphics settings, and it took about 1.5 minutes almost to get to this screen, so that wasn't a good sign. The next screen is usually where your driver, the guy you drive as, or the in-game comes from, and like what their blood type and their language, and some interface options there. It took another minute or so to get to this screen. At least the menus from then on seem to not take nearly as long as the first 2. But you can see the, it's not at a very high frame rate. Even with the leaves falling off of that tree there, you can tell something's like way off. Another couple minutes later, when I finally got to a place where you can actually drive in the game, this is what I was met with. That's, wow, it's a blurry mess, and the frame rate is absolutely atrocious. Now, I thought, okay, maybe Art of Rally is a one-off or something like that, right? It's just not working on this operating system for some reason, and I could probably tweak it or something like that. Even though I had tried a few different versions of Proton, I decided to launch God of War, and I was met with this. Yeah, that's really slow frame rate on the opening cinematics for the game. And about almost 16 minutes in, the main menu finally starts loading in. Now, I've tested this game on this hardware before, in Linux and Windows, and it works. It works. I never had anything quite like this. This is really, really slow. Wow. I then tested Skyrim Special Edition, the GOG version, in Hero Games Launcher, and I was met with more of the same, just a really slow frame rate. This is just on the loading screen. I happen to have both versions, both the Steam version and the GOG version, because I originally had the Steam version all those years ago when the first Skyrim came out. As soon as I heard of GOG, and as soon as Skyrim Special Edition was on sale, I got it there because it has no DRM. GOG doesn't anyway. So there is that. When it finally started to load in, it was kind of like this. Wow. Is it frames per second, or is it seconds per frame? This is just not playable. Games are not working at all in Hero Games Launcher at this point, as what I concluded in this Zorin OS 18 beta. It's just not working. I did end up trying something else to get God of War to work in Zorin OS 18 beta. Okay, so running the game in Hero Games Launcher wasn't working. So one of the things I tried was actually adding the game manually in Steam. And basically you just go to wherever you installed it within Heroic and look for the executable file. And that's how you can manually add a game to Steam. And it's fairly straightforward to do. And then I was going to manage it and set properties. How am I going to run this? So I'm going to force the compatibility of a certain type of Proton to run within Steam. That shows, the glorious egg roll, the latest version of that. And voila, it was working. I had to go into the settings and change some things to get it to perform within a reasonable frame rate. The original settings did not work. So I changed the preset to low. And of course for the graphics I set it down, render scale down to 50%. And of course the window or the resolution was 900p, so it's downscaled to 450p. And where it looks like in the beginning of the game here, it's still not quite getting to a good frame rate doing it this way. Okay, so I installed Lutris and tested Cyberpunk 2077 as well before testing God of War, just to see if Lutris would work. And, well, it worked with Cyberpunk 2077. So what I did was I ended up installing Lutris instead of, to try something different other than what I had tried, which was Games Launcher and Steam. You can sign up, you can sign into GOG and the Epic Game Store and Lutris as well. So that's what I did. After installing Cyberpunk 2077 in Lutris, I was able to benchmark it at 900p and 720p in the in-game benchmark. The settings I used were high textures, basically low for everything else except for crowd density, which was set to medium, and this was in the in-game benchmark. At 900p, it looks like, according to the in-game benchmark and my experience, yeah, it says 30 frames per second for an average, but that's not going to be playable. At 720p, it's at almost 39 frames per second. That's going to be close to playable or playable maybe. And that's at those same settings. So, I thought maybe it's just Zorin OS didn't like Games Launcher, and perhaps, Lutris could be an answer. So I decided to set up God of War through Lutris, and it took forever. And eventually I got this screen during the installation process. The God of War installation failed. At this point I'd given up on Zorin OS 18 beta and installed Zorin 17.3. Alright, so I booted Zorin OS 17.3 to see if there's a difference in how it handles Heroic Games Launcher. Looks like Heroic Games Launcher is in the app, package manager, app store, whatever you want to call it. Testing Art of Rally on Zorin OS 17.3, and in game the game is playable and an acceptable frame rate. Yeah. So not the same problems that were present in the beta. Alright, so let's try to launch God of War and Zorin OS 17.3. Okay, so far, looks like everything's doing alright. I mean, the menu, the opening cinematics are at the regular speed. Who'd have thought? Mind you, this whole process from the opening cinematics like that just shows the PlayStation to getting to this menu in the beta took over 15 minutes. This took, once it loaded, like 30 seconds, so yeah, not even that. Big difference. Okay, I've just gotten into game and yeah, it looks like everything's working fine. It's certainly playable. I might want to switch around, turn the FSR off and just use resolution scaling instead to fix these graphics. But it's working. So in fact, when I did tweak the graphics settings a bit more for God of War in Zorin OS 17.3, I was able to get it run pretty well and look okay for this hardware. Yeah, it works as well as it does at least in Linux Mint. It's not quite as good as Bazite because I'm able to run it at a higher resolution and still get it be playable, but it's still pretty good. Okay, so loading Skyrim, the GOG version in Heroic Games Launcher and Zorin OS 17.3 seems to show no problems at all. Looks like it's working perfectly and it's performing okay. Oh, it looks like it runs Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the Sith Lords 2 as well. Looks like no problems for this older game. Sometimes older games can trip the systems up, so it's worth it. It's worth a look anyway to see if this worked. So Stray looks like it's working fine in Zorin OS 17.3 as well. And Baldur's Gate 3 launches and runs fine in this OS. Although at this frame rate, I'd be worried that it might need to lower the settings in busier areas of the game. So in Zorin OS 17.3, I did try Horizon Zero Dawn, the complete edition. That's the GOG version. And I tried 6 different versions of Proton, and none of them worked. The game would launch fine, but it always freeze on a loading screen, either like this or like this. With Heroic Games Launcher just not working at all in Zorin OS 18 beta, it's just not ready for gaming at all. Lutris was also quite unreliable as well. At least Steam worked. They've got some work to do if they're going to get this ready for Windows 10 ending support in less than 2 weeks, if they want to release it before that happens. If Horizon Zero Dawn Complete Edition is a complete outlier in Zorin OS 17.3, then it's a competent, if not exciting, gaming distro. Bazite is much better, for instance. So if you are a Windows 10 user and a gamer looking to switch to Linux when Windows 10 ends support, I cannot recommend Zorin OS at this time. Bazite and CachyOS might be better options. Now, if you have aging NVIDIA hardware like this system tested was, Bazite is probably the best choice at this time. Like and subscribe if you like the video, and comments are always welcome. Like and subscribe if you like the video, and comments are always welcome.